Singing in synagogue. I attended a bar mitzvah recently, and in a house of worship that's pretty unfamiliar to me, I learned something about my own people. This temple is in Seattle, Washington, but as twin brothers carried their ancestral Torah, I was carried back to a little town in central Georgia, a town where my mother grew up, in Eatonton. Well, to hear her tell it, there was no finer place on earth. The sun is brighter there, the birds sing better, and the peaches were sweeter. She only left 'cause hard times fell. It was a place of great contradiction, however, where people loved the black women who raised them and yet were staunch segregationalists. Jewish people were separate too, and I've heard the stories of my grandmother singing in a Jewish synagogue about 1,000,000 times. Mama used to say there just weren't enough Jews in Eatonton, so your grandmother went to sing with them. It amazes me that anyone in my mother's family had anything to do with the Jewish faith. While my father worked with Roanoke's Interfaith Council, my mother was, well, she was just a tad anti-Semitic. She marginalized Jewish people in the mannerly way that Southerners have elevated to an art. But my mother talked with pride about her mother walking down a dusty road all the way to the outskirts of town and singing in Hebrew. Mama said it was a brave thing she did to go there alone and sing with the Jews. Well, why? I asked when I was little. Why was it brave? Mama never answered me directly. She just said there was an incident, and it was a different time, and even prominent citizens sometimes did the wrong thing. Well, how come, if Jews are separate, did grandmother want to go join them, I asked. Your grandmother thought it a miscarriage of justice what happened to that pencil manager, just a miscarriage of justice. But your grandfather ran a cotton mill and he was scared, my mother told me. I was told that the pencil manager was a northern Jew who went to Atlanta and something terrible happened. Well, when I was grown, I understood that the reason my grandmother had walked to that synagogue is that dear old grandfather wouldn't take her. He didn't approve of his wife singing in a synagogue. She could sing in the Episcopal Church where she belonged. He especially didn't approve after the incident. I didn't understand this incident until I was in college. Mama wouldn't tell me, said it was just not a story for a little girl. But it was because of the poor Franks that your grandmother thought singing in synagogue was important. Well, I figured I had gotten all the information I was ever going to get about my grandmother going to synagogue in 1915. But then I saw the twins, Ethan and Jesse, face their congregation with the eager confidence of young men who've studied and practiced and prayed. I listened to the boys chant, teach, read the ancient words, and somehow the wisdom of the Torah translated for me what my grandmother had done long ago, the year that Leo Frank was lynched. She'd been standing up. Leo Frank managed the National Pencil Factory in Atlanta, where a young girl named Mary Fagan was killed. There was very little evidence linking Frank to the crime, and massive letters and appeals flooded in from across America. Well, in 2 years' time, the governor commuted the sentence to life imprisonment, but an angry mob stormed the jail and lynched Leo Frank. The incident ignited the Ku Klux Klan when the Knights of Mary Fagan congregated on Stone Mountain a few days later. Those were the men my grandfather feared. The Knights drove the governor out of office, called him the King of the Jews. But they didn't scare my little grandmother, who carried her music to the synagogue despite the Ku Klux Klan or her husband's protest. She stood up. I wonder if the flu epidemic hadn't killed grandmother, maybe my mother would have been a lot more tolerant. I'll never know. But I think I just heard my grandmother sing in this Jewish choir, celebrating and praising, helping two young men find the courage to make life a blessing. The great joy of the bar mitzvah flooded the temple like sunlight, and as the twins received the faith of their ancestors, I understood the faith of one of mine a little better, and I was grateful for all I understood and the many gifts that are still a mystery. I'm Auntmama, and that's a little tale from my neck of the woods. Thank you all for listening now.